Hello and welcome to session 35 of Talking Asperger's with Andrew. My name's Andrew Marsh and I'm an advocate for people who have Asperger's syndrome in the workplace. I'm going to talk to you today about one of the techniques that employers can use to help people with Asperger's syndrome do better at their work. And that's quite a simple thing, but it's a very powerful technique, and that is the use of color coding. You might be thinking, why would I need to do that? Well, people with Asperger's are very focused on what they're doing, but they can get overwhelmed by having too much information in one hit. They then lose track of what the priorities are, what the focus is, and what they should be doing at any given time. So giving them a long list of things to do is going to be counterproductive because they're not going to be sure which thing they should be focusing on first. So as I've said before in one of my previous sessions about communication and how you break things down into manageable chunks, the use of color coding is just one of those techniques that can really work well in identifying different types of tasks by category or different types of tasks by priority. And you can use two different sets of coding for that. And what it does is it gives the person with Asperger's syndrome the confidence to know what it is that you want them to do first. Say you've got a list of 10 tasks for them to do over the course of a week or 2 weeks. That's probably going to be too much for them to think, I can deal with this, I can cope with this, because they're going to be saying, what if I need to do that point? And what if my boss comes and asks me about something else that's further down the list? Is the list in priority order, or are they just a list of 10 things that you've been needed to do? So it's really important to color code them so that you might have two or three items which are high priority. So you might want to color code those red. Red, amber, green works really well for prioritizing color coding. You might have three or four colors that items that are medium priority. So you put that as amber, and you might have two or three or four items that can wait a little while, can wait a week or two. So you'd put those as a green color code, a green priority, like a set of traffic lights. And what that does is, instead of then the person with Asperger's thinking, I've got 10 or 12 things to do for the next 2 weeks, they think, no, I've got two or three things to focus on for the foreseeable future. I can then attack those. I can set about doing each of those tasks well, doing them properly, devoting the right amount of time to them, and being confident that what they're doing is what they've been asked to do in the right priority and in the framework. And it works really well. It's a very simple thing to color code something, and you can use them on flip charts. You can use them in spreadsheets because you can use color within the actual body of the spreadsheet, but you can also color the labels, the labels on the tabs. You can color those as well. If you just highlight over the tab button, right click, you can change the color of the tab. So it's another immediate way of coding for prioritizing, and that gives them the confidence to know what they're doing first. So the reason for doing this is because you want the person with Asperger's to work well, to work efficiently, and to be comfortable that they're doing what you want them to do. So rather than give them 10 things and they got to work out for themselves, because some people do, they're not particularly good at prioritizing as a manager. And this is something that the manager needs to think about before they give the tasks and allocate the tasks. Think, okay, what are the one or two things that I need to be done this week or need to be done today? Let's put those as a red code. Other things can be done towards the end of the week. Amber, things that can be put off until next week or the week after, have those green. And by having the manager think about the priorities of the task they're doing actually creates a better working environment, because they're then thinking about how they communicate with the people who they have in their teams who have Asperger's. And that is really important. It's really significant that the manager thinks about how to adapt what they're doing so that the person with Asperger's can do good work, can prioritize, and can be comfortable that they're doing what is required of them. And the use of color coding really does focus that ability, focus that need, so that the person who's doing the work knows what they're doing, what they're tasked with doing. But the other important thing is, as a manager of a team of people who have different abilities, different backgrounds, different cultures, ethnicities, and gender types, and different brain types, and they work in different ways. What it's actually doing is by helping them helping them understand how you work best. What you're actually doing in a very gentle, very non-confrontational way is you're actually training your boss, your manager, in how to best communicate with you. And that won't be the same necessarily as the person sitting next to you in your team and the other people in the team. And the really important point is that the boss, the manager, supervisor, doesn't treat everyone as a one size fits all, because that will lead to some people being left out, some people not sure what they should be doing, some people really having difficulty understanding what they're required to do. Some bosses send out great screeds, great reports, and great, 5-6 page emails with, I want you to do this. And it's just a page dump. It's just a page dump of information. Whereas, and that to someone with Asperger's is going to be overload. They're going to look at this, they think, what on earth am I supposed to do with this 6 pages of stuff that they've asked me to do? I don't know what they want me to do first. By breaking that down into more manageable chunks and to prioritizing and having bullet points, it makes it easier for the person with Asperger's to read and comprehend. And if they're doing that better, then they're going to understand what you've asked them to do better. But having color coding to that situation emphasizes what is the priority and what can be left for a later date. And so the use of color coding to signify different types of work and different priorities of work is really important, because it then focuses the person with Asperger's syndrome on what it is they need to tackle first. And that's really it. There's not a lot more to say about it other than it is incredibly useful, because people with Asperger's syndrome tend to be more visual learners, more visually orientated in how they learn and comprehend information that's presented to them. And so having something that is color coded, they can immediately see what they need to do, what is top priority, what's middle, what's bottom priority. Or it might be that they color code them into different task types. So one task might be doing something on a spreadsheet, one task might be writing a report, one task might be doing some analysis. If you have those as 3 different codes, 3 different colors, you can easily see which task it is that you're supposed to be doing. And that really helps the person with Asperger's understand what it is that you want them to do, which ultimately is the aim of management. The aim of management is to distribute the work in such a way that each person knows how to do what they're doing in the way that best suits them. And as I just said earlier, that means that it might be different to the person sitting next to you. They might be fine with having a 10-page report to file through and to riff through to find out what it is they want. Someone with Asperger's is going to want to be more specific, more precise. Come back to those 3 words that I keep coming back to with communication. Be specific, be precise, be accurate in what it is that you want someone to do. The use of color coding is a very clear, very easily to see way of doing that. So that if you're in a meeting, for example, and you're presenting to them as what you want them to do, you can have your flip chart, and you can use different color pens. I mean, it's as simple as that. This is not a difficult concept to grasp. Using different color pens. So, okay, when I'm doing in a red pen, these are the priority things, or I'm underlining in a red pen, that's the priority. Underlining in an orange pen, amber orange is lower priority, and green is a lower priority again. And these visual clues and cues are really important for someone with Asperger's, because they can see at a glance what it is they want to do. And it may well be that they will make their own color coding of tasks as they break it down. I used to be a geologist in the construction industry in the design teams, and quite often we would have large projects, a motorway scheme, for example, 13 kilometers of road. So you've got a big scheme, you've got a lot of information and a lot of data. And so what we would do is we would break that down into different sections. So there would be sections that would break down into structures, which were bridges, whether they over bridges or under bridges. In other words, was the road going over or under the existing road? Were they cuttings or were they embankments? And again, so breaking them up into structures, cuttings and embankments immediately broke your task down into three different areas, and then you could summarize the information for each section on its own merits with all of its relevant information, rather than having too much information not well categorized. You could break it down into individual sections. And when I was doing cuttings, for example, they were some of the most interesting things to do, because ideally on a large project, when you're doing a lot of earthworks, in other words, you've got cuttings and you've got embankments, you want the material that you're using, that you're digging out of the cutting, to be suitable to build the embankment with, because it's just a short haul from one point of the site to another part of the site, rather than all the material in the cuttings you can't use, it's not suitable to build the embankment with. So you've got to do something with that. So you've got to pay to throw that away, to send it to landfill, which we don't want to do. We don't want to fill up all our landfill sites with stuff from construction sites. And then you've got to buy in material that is going to be suitable to build the embankments with. And so you're paying through the nose to get rid of the material, and paying through the nose to get more suitable material in. If you can use what you've got in the cuttings to build the embankments, it's just a short haul, it's easily to do, and it makes the job more efficient, more cost effective. And that's how big projects are done on an earthworks basis, whenever at all possible. So when we have a cutting, we have to identify the material that we've got in the cutting, and at the different depths there might be different strata, and are they suitable, are they unsuitable? So I would make cross sections through the cuttings, and I would color the different types of material a different color. I had a particular code that I used that I would particularly stick to, and so certain types of material that I would, if I was color coding them, I would put glacial till, which is boulder clay, which is quite good for building roads with. That would be blue. Sands and gravels would be red or orange. Alluvial soils would be yellow. Those are just the colors that I would use, so that I know that on another job, if I was looking through something and I saw those colors that I'd used, I'd know what they were. So I was consistent within myself. And so that, using cross sections and coloring them up, is a great way of presenting information, so that when you're going through and you're discussing with your bosses, and they're saying, how are we getting on with this and what have we got to deal with, you can say, well, these are the colors, these are the materials that we've got, these are going to be suitable, these are going to be marginal, these are going to be unsuitable, and they can immediately see at a glance. So you can present the sections and say, that's what we're dealing with, that's what we're tackling, so you can quantify the different types of material. That I'm trying not to make that too complicated, but it's very straightforward, really. You're just having different colors for different types of material, and that identifies what you have and what you've got, and then you then quantify that throughout each individual cutting, and you then produce an overall balance of the earthworks. How much are you digging out? How much are you going to need to put back in to build the embankments, and so on. So there's something called a mass haul, which is where all of that balances out in an individual basis by cutting and by embankment. And so using color coding in my work, this was before I knew I had Asperger's, but it was a great way of me understanding what we had. My colleagues understood it, because they would always color code and color the cross sections. They might use different colors to me, but there would be a key on the side of the drawing that showed what the different types of material were, so that we could see at a glance what we have, what the purpose for, what it was used for, and so that when we're presenting that to our bosses, we could see at a glance, this is what we've got, three types of material, and they could see at a glance, so that they could understand the broader picture of what was going on, so that when we presented that and wrote the reports for individual sections, they understood what it meant, they understood the nature of the material, and so that when they came to read those reports, they had a feeling for it themselves before they sit in and go into the nitty gritty. So color coding and using of color for cross sections is a very good way of presenting information. It just works, it works because you can see things visually, and you can understand things quite quickly and at a glance. And once you get your eye in, with having done this a few times, you see the value of color coding cross sections to represent what you're doing in the job that you're working on. So that was just one example as a geologist using cross sections, but there's a whole range of applications that you can use color coding, whether you're color coding your spreadsheets by the tabs, or whether you're coloring certain rows or certain columns, because you might be looking at financial data, for example, and you might want to know what the big number items are, what the most expensive items are. So you would color code those red, and again you would have your key. Then you would have medium, a different color for medium ranking costs, and then you'd have a different color for low ranking costs, so that you could see, looking at your spreadsheet, instead of trying to think on all the numbers, and particularly if you're scrolling up and down the page, you can say, yep, there's a red one, that's a highlight, what is that? That's a big ticket item, so let's look at that, let's focus on what that means and how we can address that. So at a glance, you can see from the color coding of your spreadsheet what are the important, what are the less significant, and what are the least significant items on your spreadsheet, which then gets you a visual representation of what you have, and you can see and understand the information far more clearly than just scrolling through and just looking at numbers, and you might miss something. If you color code it, it's a good way of presenting information so that you can understand what's going on, but you can also present that to your colleagues, your bosses, and they can see at a glance, yep, these are the big ticket items, these are the ones we need to focus on. And you can pull up anomalies as well. You could perhaps use a purple color for strange anomalies that when you're looking at it originally you didn't think you would have, but this one is you can use a different color as a flag. I use purple for flags because it sticks out really well on the spreadsheet. So that's an anomalous reading number. Don't quite understand where that came from, but immediately you can highlight it, and so you can then discuss that separately from the other data and get a better feel for what all the information is on your spreadsheet. Just have a quick drink. So the use of color coding works for people who are visual, and that is most people who have Asperger's syndrome, because that's how their brain works. And so if they can see and understand the information that's being presented to them in a simple color coding, don't have too many colors, try and simplify it into a relatively small number of colors. Otherwise, if you've got 8 or 10 or 12 colors, you're going to start to get to overwhelming them and confusing them. So try and have broad ranges within your data so that you have a smaller number of colors, and you can then see at a glance what it is that your information is and what it means and how that's presented to others in your teams and your bosses. So that's really all I wanted to cover with color coding. It's a very useful, simple technique, doesn't cost anything to implement. You might, for example, have certain sections of certain reports with different color paper. That works really well. But obviously you need to make sure that you're consistent with that, so that the blue paper is always the same thing in a different report, so that you can get a feel for how that works. And that works well as well, having different color paper in reports or when presenting information to others and your colleagues and bosses or clients. So that's one way that works. Color coding on the information with tabs on spreadsheets, or with your priorities, your red, amber, green prioritizing. And all of these things are aids to help people understand the information that you've got. What is a priority? What's a lower priority? And how they can then tackle those in the right order, and report back to you in the sort of timeframes that you need, so that you're working together, you're all working as a team, and everyone on the team knows what the priorities are. And that's really important, that everyone who's working on projects knows what their roles are, what their teams are, and what are the priorities for their particular aspects of their work, and how they can then relate to other people on the teams. If you need to do something to complete first before someone else takes on that information and then uses and manipulates that in a different way further downstream, then you obviously need to have done your part first before someone else can take that on. So you don't want to leave that till the end of the time for the program, because you're not going to leave the next person who's going to be taking that information on any time to do what they need to do with it. So planning the program is a very good way of doing that. And one of the ways that I do that with a program, I used back in the olden days before we had computers, graph paper, A3 graph paper, or even bigger, A2 or A1 graph paper, color coding on the graph paper what your programs were, and you can see at a glance how everything all fits together. You can put your key lines and your key aspects of those projects in different colors so that you immediately see where they are and how everything fits together. Lots of applications for using color coding, but really the purpose of it is to make sure that people understand what is significant, what is less significant, what is priority, what is lower priority, and that's so that they can work and set out there how they're going to do their work in a clear and efficient way, so that any knock-on effects have been thought about and planned and programmed in the overall project scheme for your client. So that's today's topic, which was color coding. I'm an Asperger's advocate, and I work with employers to help them better manage people who have Asperger's syndrome in the workplace. I have a 7-steps program on doing exactly that, how to manage people with Asperger's in the workplace. And if you're interested in that or want to know more about that, then please drop me a line at Andrew at aspergersmatters.com. That's my email address. Or you can do an inquiry through my website, which is aspergersmatters.com, as you can see behind me there. So if you want to know more about people with Asperger's syndrome, or how I can help you manage them better and more efficiently, then I would welcome the opportunity to get in touch for a free consultation, and we can see whether there's a fit for us, and I can help you with your teams at any level within your business. So my name's Andrew Marsh. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. And if you have any questions, then please feel free to get in touch through my website, aspergersmatters.com. That's all for today. Keep a lookout for Friday, when I'll be posting what next week's Talking Asperger's with Andrew will be. But until then, thank you for your time. If you're watching this on YouTube, then feel free to drop me a line with any questions that you might have or any comments, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But until next week, take care. Thank you very much, and goodbye.